This is Casey from Whiskey Wolf, here with episode 3 on creating a podcast. I promise I'll come up with a better name at some point. But in today's video, we're going to be going over our models. Now, in the last episode, I talked a little bit about the code generation. To start this episode, we're going to be talking about our pubspec.yaml file. This file is where we bring in outside libraries into ours. And you can see here, I've already created two sets. We have the dependency and the dev dependencies. Now, what's the difference? Dev dependencies don't get compiled into the actual published build. Dev dependencies are kept locally on your machine for development. So build runner here is a tool that we use to generate the generation code. But the end user doesn't need that in the end. So why would we make them download that entire library bundled with the application? The answer is we don't. What actually gets bundled with the application is up here in the actual dependencies. These will not be the last libraries we import, so you'll see more examples of this later on. But I just wanted to highlight what we've actually got here. So with that started, we can actually start to take a look at our API. If we come down here to the get method of post/podcast by ID, we can start to take a look at what information we're going to be able to get from the API. So we can see the JSON body here that is a sample one that's returned to us. Now we don't really need all of these. We just need some of them because I'm not worried about the listen notes URL. We might put an explicit content later on, but I'm not doing that to start. And I'm not worried about these publishing dates. So, what do we actually need? Well, let's take a look at the models we're actually going to create. I've already created these, so you don't have to watch me type all of this out. But we're going to be using freeze for these model classes, like I've mentioned. And to do that, we create an abstract class annotated with freezed with this weird mix-in. This $sign typically denotes something that's generated. And these part files are where the generated code lives. So the freeze code lives under podcast.freeze.dart, and our JSON lives under podcast.g.dart. This is a little bit of legacy that's really hard to undo now, so that's why other packages have started creating their own extensions. But what is a part? Let's start there. Parts are ways to split up files, so that way they're automatically imported into one giant file. Before compile, so that way when everything is compiled as one file. What this allows us to do is separate some of this code, so that way we're not looking at all of this code that is generated for us and we don't actually need to look at. So let's go back. So we're just going to take a quick overview of the information we're actually going to be using. And we're going to be using the ID, the type, the image, the title, the country, the website, list of episodes, the language, the list of genre IDs, and the thumbnail. Now, we saw that the list of episodes is actually an embedded object. But I didn't describe the object there. So how is that managed? Well, that's some of the beauty magic of the JSON serialization generated in the .g file. Well, it'll automatically call to and from JSON on embedded objects like this. So we don't have to manage that ourselves. We can override this if we wanted to, but I don't have a reason to, so I'm not. And then we have this secondary constructor from JSON, which takes in the map of string and dynamic, common for JSON, and just forwards it to a generated function called podcast from JSON. And our model classes are that simple to create. I'm just going to quickly go over just show you what we've done in episode. So looking at what this episode is here, we're taking in the ID, the link, the audio link, the image, the title, the thumbnail, the description, the published date in milliseconds, and the audio length in seconds. This should be enough to get us started. We will probably be editing these as we go. Now, there's another one that I felt like we should probably just get right from the start, and that's the best podcasts. So this one just returns a list of an object that contains a list of podcasts and just gives us some recommendations in a category. You'll notice up here this is a really complicated looking URL with some query parameters. We'll go more into those later on once we start to look at the repository in the next episode. Don't need them for now. So let's talk code generation for a second. So I've already mentioned that this code that you should never modify by hand, and it gets generated. But I also mentioned that we should be able to commit, we don't want to commit these. So rather than deleting them every time, I'm doing this to make a point in a minute, we're going to add them to our git ignore. As you can see, I've already added star.g.dart, star.freeze.dart. Stars is just a wildcard so that anything that matches this pattern will get included in the git ignore. But now we have a problem. How do we actually generate all of this code? Well, that's because I left something on. We have two ways of generating this code. We can do flutter pub run build runner build. And what this command will do is it'll go through your entire source code and look for any of these annotations that it knows what to do with. Now I said there was two. What's the other one and what is it? Why do we have it? The other one is flutter pub run build runner watch. And what this one will do is it'll watch your file system. And every time you save, like you saw when I clicked away, it'll just go through and automatically generate all of the code for you. So that way you don't need to manage it. With all of this done though, what we can do is we can come over to our commit and we can add all of these commits and we will add them with a commit message of basic podcast models. We are going to commit them and we will run git push and push them to the repository. So you'll have already seen this in the source code from a couple of days ago, but that's just because I'm recording a few days in advance. So, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you're enjoying the content so far, and I look forward to creating more with you. I'll see you guys in the next episode.